Hey, well, it's a pleasure to speak to you all tonight. Thank you so much for making the time. My talk tonight is on one of the most incredible scientists in history and his little known work on carnivorous plants, which basically founded our understanding of these amazing plants and has ramifications right the way up to today. Then I've got a little bit of an overview of what I'm doing with a project. We're sailing a 120-year-old tall ship following Darwin's journey to train conservationists. It's called Darwin200. And by coincidence, the ICPS has very generously sponsored one of these amazing young conservationists to study carnivorous plants in South Africa. So I've got some photos to showcase that, an update on that. So my name is Stewart McPherson. It's a pleasure to speak to you tonight. I've been studying carnivorous plants in the wild for about 20 years or so. I've done about 300 expeditions to climb about 200 or so mountains, to write 35 books, and I was very lucky to discover about 30 new species of them and do some films and TV documentaries on them. So that's my background. I've got a deep passion for carnivorous plants, and to say they've been quite a big part of my life for a long time. So it's a subject I really love and care about. So yeah, my talk tonight is who is Darwin, his work on carnivorous plants, my Darwin200 project, and some amazing carnivorous plants from South Africa, and an equally amazing young conservationist called Andre, who's doing a project to study them. So very, very briefly, you might have heard of Darwin. He's one of the pictures you think of when you hear the word scientist. People often think of Newton or Einstein or Darwin. Of course, he did a massive, or he partook in a massive voyage around the world from 1831 to 1836. Arguably, this is one of the greatest adventures in science. It had some of the most important ramifications that ripple right the way through to this day. But he was actually only 22 when he started this journey. He went aboard a Royal Navy ship called HMS Beagle. It journeyed over 5 years from here in the UK, all the way down the coast of South America, across the Pacific, via Australia, across the Indian Ocean, then back up the Atlantic, back to England. Honestly, we could do a 10-hour talk on the voyage of the Beagle. We just haven't got time to do this tonight properly. But arguably, this is one of the most important journeys in science. It was an incredible journey of discovery for Darwin, and the ideas that emerged from it absolutely changed the world. And Darwin saw an incredible range of wildlife, especially, of course, in the Galapagos, where his studies where his observations later led to his studies of evolution and natural selection. But the story isn't, or might not be, how you might think it to be. Many people have an image or an understanding of Darwin that is completely wrong, and especially with regards to his work on carnivorous plants. When you say the word Darwin, people often think of a crusty old guy with a beard, this photo here on the right, in the last couple of years of his life. But as I said earlier, he was 22 when he undertook this voyage. What you've got to understand, it was not about Darwin. Don't imagine Darwin on the prow of this ship, like a Columbus figure conquering the world and going around exploring. He was absolutely incidental to this. He came at the very last minute. He came really by coincidence more than anything. He got to know of this opportunity to sail on this ship. The ship, by the way, was doing a survey. It had nothing to do with Darwin and nothing to do with science. It was a survey voyage to create the maps of South America, particularly the southern coasts of Brazil and Chile, or what was now Brazil, Chile, and Argentina. So it was nothing to do with Darwin at the start. But Darwin, through a series of very unlikely circumstances, got the opportunity to sail aboard. But he actually had to pay his way as a civilian. So to be clear, it was not a voyage about Darwin. It was a voyage to create maps that Darwin came along on, and as I say, undertook this journey around the world. But Darwin might not be who you think he is. He grew up in Shrewsbury in England, but he wasn't a naturalist or a natural scientist. Kind of the opposite, actually. His mother sadly died really early, and his teachers described him as an ordinary boy, rather below the common level of intellect. He wasn't actually very good at school. He left school early, and his dad wrote him a letter saying how you'll bring shame upon yourself and your family. He went to study medicine at Edinburgh, and he actually flunked out of his degree. He failed. So he then went to Cambridge to study. Sorry, this is wrong. He went to study theology, so religious studies, basically. And it was there that he met this incredible professor called Professor Henslow, who helped him get this opportunity to sail on the Beagle. He went to meet Captain Fitzroy, the commander of this ship. Fitzroy himself was just 25 at that time. It's mind-blowing how young these guys were. So imagine giving a 25-year-old a ship with 70 men on it and instructing that 25-year-old to sail it around the world for 5 years. And this was his second command, by the way. So this wasn't his first command. So it's amazing how young these captains and equally Darwin himself was. He didn't really even get to a good start there. Fitzroy nearly rejected him by the shape of his nose. Many Victorians believed in this old belief of physiognomy, which is how your physical characteristics can, portray your traits. And Fitzroy thought the shape of Darwin's nose implied that he didn't have determination, which of course is one of the greatest understatements probably of history. But anyway, nose aside, he eventually accepted Darwin, and Darwin went aboard on the ship in December 1831. And after weeks of waiting, the ship was meant to leave on Christmas Day, on December the 21st, 1831. But the sailors got so drunk, it didn't actually leave for 2 days later. And so basically, they set sail and embarked on this incredible 5-year journey around the world. Remember, today, you and I can jump on a plane. Okay, it's a bit expensive, but it's totally affordable and easy, really. You could fly to Rio de Janeiro tomorrow for $500, $1,000, or whatever. You could do that. Darwin and Victorians in the early 19th century could not do that. This kind of opportunity was extremely rare. In fact, Henslow himself said it was a once in a century opportunity. So think in the mindset of this time. This was an extremely rare opportunity to go around the world. And so Darwin was very, very lucky to have it. So we haven't got time to tell the full story of the voyage of the Beagle. We'd need 10 hours to do that. But suffice to say, he did this incredible journey right on the boundary of the old world and the new world. I mean, in the sense of the pre-industrial world and the industrial world. This was just when the Industrial Revolution was really kicking off. And so Darwin kind of straddles that time zone and sees, the remote wilds of South America and different places before really big impact took place. Anyway, during this voyage, there wasn't any eureka moment. Darwin didn't suddenly, get struck with a lightning bulb and discover evolution or natural selection, or his later discoveries, including carnivorous plants, which we'll come to. But rather, like everything with him, it's a gradual process that built up over many, 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 many years. Anyway, his work on evolution spans, 15 years, and it culminated in the publication of On the Origin of the Species. With this paragraph, I just wanted to read you because, in my opinion, this is one of the most beautiful passages written ever in science. After studying and completely revolutionizing how we understand the natural world, Darwin ended the book in this way. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having originally been breathed into a few forms or into one, and that while this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed laws of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved. This is the ending of his book. And this book sold out on the day of publication. It's been described arguably as the most important work in the history of science. But Darwin himself was absolutely vilified. He was described as the most dangerous man in England. Ironically, he was at home, in his words, quivering like a jelly. And this is partly why he procrastinated. He delayed publishing for 15 years because he didn't want to cause a controversy. He hated this idea of causing this disruption and impact. He himself was absolutely vilified. The press went after him, particularly the authorities of the day. The religious authorities of the day described him as a dangerous man. He was known as the monkey man. And well, look at this drawing here. There's Darwin jumping through a hoop. I believe this is Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, one of his key supporters here as a monkey. And if you look on this side here, it says ignorance that he's about to jump through, and credulity on the left. So he was absolutely vilified. This is really insulting in the 19th century. He was described as the monkey man and as evil and just absolutely laughed at, because this idea of evolution, this idea of natural selection, was so counter to the thinking of the day. In some circles, it was initially thought of as just ridiculous, and so Darwin was laughed at and drawn in this way, and portrayed in this this very insulting way, which is so sad when you think of this great mind, this beautiful mind, illuminating like a candle in the darkness, illuminating our origins. And just it again, if you look through his study, the beauty of his mind, the beauty of his thought and his work is just astonishing, especially when you get into the mindset and the challenges. Anyway, so this all happened. The theory of evolution. Sorry, I really should say the idea of natural selection. To be clear, that's really what Darwin promulgated. The idea of natural selection as a means for evolution has been described as the biggest single thought in the history of human thinking. The reason for that is it changed everything you see in the natural world. And it really marks the boundary between natural philosophy and the modern scientific method. It had enormous implications, of course, not least with our origins, but equally our understanding of religion versus science. And there was a very important debate in Oxford here in the UK that really cemented that, and arguably was the watershed moment. Anyway, again, it's a shame we haven't got time to go into that, but this brings us into carnivorous plants, because after Darwin's published on natural selection, he spent the next 4 decades of his life studying a rainbow of amazing subjects, from earthquakes and mountain building to the formation of corals, to the origin of man and emotions in animals and humans, to movements in plants, to carnivorous plants, which we're going to come to, and his last work, which I think is really fitting and really shows him as a man. He focused his last work in the last years of his life on a really humble subject, the formation of soil by earthworms, and many other subjects which we haven't got time to look at today, but focusing on carnivorous plants now. So Darwin stepped into this world to look at carnivorous plants. This is a couple of years after the publication of On the Origin of the Species. At that time, in the early 19th century, carnivorous plants had been discovered but were not understood. Europe very much was the center of this at this time. Amazing plants were being brought back to Europe for cultivation by the aristocracy, the royalty, and the very start of the commercial nurseries selling exotic plants. You've got to get your mindset. It's mind-blowing when you think about it. This all took place at a time of significantly colder climate. This, by the way, you can debate whether climate change is real or whatever. You can debate that. What you can't debate is historic records. And without any question whatsoever, the 19th century was a blip. It was a colder period. It's known as the Little Ice Age. To be clear, it wasn't an ice age at all. It's just a name. But it was definitely a period of cooler global temperatures. For example, the River Thames in London used to freeze over, and they used to have so-called frost fairs on the river. And if you read Charles Dickens's books, for example, you'll read those accounts where London would get 2 feet of snow, which today it doesn't really get any. So again, this has got nothing to do with climate change in the modern context. This is total fact. The climate was definitely much colder 200 years ago. This is clearly known. And at that time, astonishingly, these exotic plants were being brought back to Europe and grown in these glass houses, for example, at Kew Gardens and many other gardens across Europe and North America as well. Astonishingly, these were coal-fired. So can you imagine heating these little pockets of jungle in these Victorian freezing winters, much colder than today, with coal? for the aristocracy and for other purposes as well. Q was also for industrial purposes and for new products. But it was just astonishing that this happened. Anyway, and by the way, this was a time you've got to juxtapose that against a time of real poverty, especially in Europe, real poverty. For example, this happened at the same time as the Irish potato famine, when millions of people literally starved to death from hunger, from famine in Ireland. Yet the aristocracy were growing these exotic plants and having these tropical worlds. So it was a pretty crazy paradox. So in the middle of the 20th century, sorry, that's 10th there, middle of the 20th century, these incredible plants were being discovered, particularly in South America and Asia, obviously the Nepenthes in Asia, and brought back to Europe and started to be grown really from the 1840s onwards in huge numbers. An incredible innovation made that happen, the Wardian case. It was a simple glass box and it enabled plants to be transported. Whereas before the Wardian case, 99 out of 100 would die. With the Wardian case, 19 out of the 100 would survive. It was literally that dramatic. So in the 1840s, enormous numbers of these amazing plants were brought back and started to be cultivated and sold to this burgeoning horticultural industry. And especially Nepenthes would often change hands for literally the average wealth of the average wage of a worker for an entire year. A single plant could go for that. Astonishing amounts of money. And there was a very Victorian romantic kind of idyll, romanticization of these palaces, these crystal palaces, these greenhouses where you could grow oranges or pineapples or palms and all these amazing exotic fruit that were brought back to Europe and North America at a time when, you must remember, the average diet would be pretty boring, pretty bland. So these exotic plants you could bring back weren't just for fun, but you could grow oranges. My goodness, an orange or a pineapple or whatever. So it was in this world that Darwin intellectually stepped into to study carnivorous plants. As I say, his work on the origin of the species was published in 1859, and immediately thereafter, he in 1860 he observed carnivorous plants, or plants we now know to be carnivorous, such as Drosera, sundews. In the UK, there's 3 native species, and Darwin wondered why they were sticky. Why do they trap bugs? Why do they sparkle? What is the purpose of this plant with sticky leaves getting covered in bugs? So he began a meticulous study of these amazing plants, particularly Drosera rotundifolia, which is very common in the south of England, which is ironically where I'm calling from today. Interestingly, Darwin's own grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, who's an amazing man in his own right, also studied carnivorous plants. Erasmus was part of it, was so-called lunatic society. The word lunatic has no connotation to what we know today as in a crazy person. It was actually a meeting every lunar cycle, in the full moon. So it had nothing to do with lunatic. But anyway, this society that Darwin's grandfather was part of, Erasmus Darwin, looked at intellectual questions and new ideas. And anyway, Darwin's grandfather studied sundews very basically, but wrote about them in his book, The Botanic Garden, and questioned also why these plants were carnivorous. Anyway, so Darwin began this 15-year studying carnivorous plants at his house called Down House in Kent. His work is unbelievable. If you really get into it and look at what he did, it is mind-blowing, the intricacy of his experiments and his studies, some of which, by the way, have been recreated at Down House that you can see today. Anyway, in a nutshell, in the early 19th century, there was speculation that plants could catch and kill insects. This wasn't a new idea, but Darwin really cemented it, and Darwin really studied this for the first time because there was no real evidence up until that point. As I mentioned, Darwin went out to study carnivorous plants and on again, off again for 15 years, studied these beautiful Drosera and noticed their responses and their extreme, what he said as irritability, what we would call as sensitivity, how the leaves move, how they respond with the tiniest touch to animal proteins and animal compounds. He actually wrote in 1860, "I care more about Drosera than the origin of all species in the world." He was definitely a carnivorous plant aficionado, and I'm sure would have been a member of the International Carnivorous Plant Society if he were alive today. He actually described Dionea, the Venus flytrap, as one of the most wonderful plants in the world. Anyway, after this massive study, he eventually published his book, his seminal book, Insectivorous Plants, in 1875. Just like his work on natural selection, he was laughed and mocked and ridiculed, just like being described as the monkey man and this ridiculous idea of evolution. The same was the case with Darwin with carnivorous plants. There were several sarcastic accounts and poems written in several of the journals of the day about, oh my goodness, I can't stand near a daisy, it'll eat me. This kind of thinking, because the idea of a plant eating insects was so radical. It would be like someone saying to you or me, rocks can eat animals. It literally would be something that radical, that outside our thinking, that many people at the time thought it was just ridiculous, just like they had with evolution. But again, like so many times with Darwin, he is, of course, proved right. And of course, we now know that many plants have the ability to catch and kill insects. And from Darwin's work, the modern definition of a carnivorous plant has evolved. That is to attract, capture, and to attract a type of animal prey, to trap it or result in its death, and then to drive some benefit from that. Okay, we now know there are some very complex ones with more complex mutualistic partnerships, but in essence, that was the result of Darwin's work, founding our understanding, literally our understanding of modern carnivorous plants. Anyway, if you ever come to the UK, I really recommend going to Down House, particularly in the autumn. It's just beautiful. They've recreated Darwin's actual collection of carnivorous plants there in Down House. And so, because 3 of his greenhouses, he had 5 greenhouses, and 3 of them survive today. So if you come over to London, definitely go to Down. It's like an hour outside London in Kent. It's absolutely beautiful. So for heaven's sake, go check it out. Anyway, as I mentioned, Darwin kind of straddles the pre-industrial industrial world. Over the last 200 years, since Darwin's work, and certainly since his journey on the Beagle, obviously humans have had an enormous impact on the world. I've seen that even in my lifetime. I'm 41 now, and even in my lifetime, even many of the carnivorous plant species I've discovered and named myself, even some of them have been impacted and brought to the brink of extinction by poaching and habitat loss and so forth. So there has been a huge impact. But equally, there are countless examples of amazing conservation stories pulling species back from the cliff of extinction, pulling species back from the absolute brink. And I've actually set up a project called Arc of Life to do exactly that, to safeguard the most rare Nepenthes species that are literally extinct or virtually extinct in the wild. But anyway, that's a separate story. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that it's not necessarily too late. For many animals and plants around the world, we can bring them back from the cliff of extinction. And so with that in mind, Charles Darwin changed the world with his mind. So with that in mind, knowing that it's within our power to change not all, but a lot of animals and plants, I created a project called DARWIN200. And that segues to the next section of my talk. So this project is called DARWIN200. It's been 10 years work to make happen. It's happening right now. We're basically sailing a historic ship called Oosterschelde. It's a Dutch ship around the world, following the journey of Darwin on HMS Beagle. The truth is, our journey isn't exactly the same as Darwin's, but we go to every major port that Darwin went to. It's as close as we can make it. Our journey is 2 years. Darwin's, or the journey that Darwin was on, the voyage of the Beagle, was 5 years. So again, they're not exactly the same, but they're as close as we can make it. We go to all of the main places that Darwin went to. We're really honoured, really, really honoured to have 3 amazing project patrons. The wonderful Dr. Jane Goodall, the equally wonderful Dr. Sylvia Earle, and one of Charles Darwin's great-great-granddaughters, Dr. Sarah Darwin, who's an accomplished botanist and a naturalist very much in her own right. Anyway, this project isn't another whiny conservation project about problems. Rather, it's about solutions. So in 5 or 10 minutes, to explain what we're doing, we've got four objectives. The first one, and the most important one, is we're selecting the world's top young conservation leaders. These are called Darwin leaders. They're 18 and above, ideally 18 to 25, but the upper limit is deliberately flexible. And we bring them to the ports that Darwin went to. They undertake life-changing programs of projects. We basically partner them with a local NGO. They have to then study the conservation of an animal or plant in question. And the idea, it's a training program. It's a way to give them incredible experience in the field that hopefully they'll then take back and use for the rest of their lives. So it's not about what university or what college they've been to. It's not about their academics. It's about a burning passion inside of them. It's different from academics. It's just the raw ability to get out there and change the world. I could give you lots of examples of some of the Darwin leaders that we've already worked with and involved. Some of them literally at the age of 18 planted 20,000 trees or set up conservation projects to save species literally as teenagers. It's that quality that we're looking for. This incandescence, this shine inside of them, this glow. It's something you can't teach, you can't train. They're just born with it. And these amazing young people work with professional cameramen or camerawomen and come to a port that we visit. So to be clear, we fly them to the port, then they use our ship as a floating laboratory / media platform. To give you one super quick example, this young man is called Joseph. He was an amazing Darwin leader we selected from India. He had spent his entire life looking at conservation of primates, of monkeys. So we flew him to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and we partnered him with an incredible conservation group there called Refauna that were reintroducing the brown howler monkeys, which Darwin saw in the forests around Rio de Janeiro, and actually even in the city today, like the Tijuca rainforest. Joseph went and did his project for a week, studying the reintroduction of the howler monkeys, literally shadowed the team, learned about the projects, learned about what they do, actually was part of the reintroduction program of these howler monkeys to rebuild the wild populations. Hopefully he brought ideas from India to Brazil and definitely learned lots in Brazil to take back to India. So he then returned back to India to use that experience for the next 50 years or more, hopefully for the rest of his life. So that's what we're doing. We've had over 100 Darwin leaders studying a rainbow of projects. These are just a few of them. So it's something like the Olympics of conservation. We're trying to create lots and lots of different conservation projects, training and empowering these amazing young people to change the world of tomorrow. These are the Darwin leaders. It's all about empowering them, giving them the skills they need to take back and use for the coming decades to change the world of tomorrow. As mentioned, they use the ship as a floating laboratory, and it costs them nothing, by the way. It's completely free for them. Even the flights, everything is free. And my biggest fear was that they would regard it just as a holiday and not take it seriously. But I'm really glad to say out of over 100 projects so far, that hasn't happened once. Every single one of the Darwin leaders have been awesome. And to prove that, I came up from my cabin on the ship. I came up actually this was about 2 a.m. and took this photo to show how hard that they were working and their little teams, the cameramen and Darwin leader teams. Anyway, we haven't got time to do it all tonight, but we've had some incredible projects. From one of them rediscovered a lost species of gecko, others have found new behavior of octopus, and lots of other incredible projects which they've undertaken. So that's the primary objective of DARWIN200. Very quickly, it's got 3 other smaller objectives. The second one is called the world's most exciting classroom. And every single week, we beam live to schools around the world. It's completely and utterly free. And every week, we create new experiments, natural history curiosity of the week. We do a live uplink to the ship. We do quizzes with conservationists beaming in from the field. And we have about £200, so about $250 US dollars in prizes every week that we give away. I have a little studio here in the south of England, and every week I pre-record an experiment segment, and then the results from so each one has a experiment 1 week, and then 2 weeks later the results. So the kids have to go away and do the experiments and send in their answers and what they've discovered. We also beam live to different places around the world every single week, so kids can literally meet animals in real time. For example, in the Galapagos, and go meet a giant tortoise and ask, what does it eat, and then see in real time by Starlink. They can literally see what it's doing and what it's eating and so forth in real time. And of course, we uplink to the ship. So for the last 2 years, the ship has been going around the world, following Darwin's journey. So we go and see where possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but where possible, we go and follow Darwin's work and see where he went and what he discovered, what he learned, and so forth. We also, as the ship's going around the world, we've got several research projects on the ship itself, including a worldwide bird survey, also a survey for pinnipeds, so seals, sea lions and their relatives, and cetaceans, so whales and dolphins and their relatives. And we do lots of special projects. We've raised loads of money to plant trees. For example, we planted 2,500 in Brazil, and another, I think from memory, 3,000 in Australia, and get kids involved in those. And then last but not least, really importantly, we really try and engage local communities. So it's not just a load of foreigners rocking up and doing their thing. It's really, really, really important to involve the communities in the countries we visit. So we give loads of opportunities for schools to come on the ship, to sail on it, or we go to the schools and give talks. We give loads of lectures and presentations, and get the conservation partners to explain their work in the communities. Because often in a certain place around the world, the local community might not know about the projects literally on their doorstep. So we try and organize these as much as possible. And dear Jane and Sylvia and Sarah have actually joined by Zoom several times in many of these to answer questions. And last but not least, we also do lots of resources. We bring resource books and boxes and so forth to schools, and iPads for the schools we visit. Yeah. So I'm speaking now in April 2025. This ship has been sailing around the world nearly for 2 years. It started in August 2023, and it ends in July 2025 at the end in Falmouth, where it gets back in England, where Darwin stepped ashore after his 5 years journey. The ship is actually in Cape Town in South Africa right now, and that segues very nicely to my next bit. A massive thank you to the ICPS for genuinely sponsoring an incredible young conservationist called Andre, who spent his life basically studying the carnivorous plants of South Africa. Through the ICPS's generous support, Andre is a Darwin leader. He's got the opportunity now to study the conservation of carnivorous plants and make 3 films and 3 reports to try and A, to help give him skills, and B, to help also spread the message of how rare and endangered some of these carnivorous plants are. Sorry, I should have mentioned earlier. So the Darwin leaders, what they actually do by studying these projects in the ports that they visit, they have to do 3 objectives. They have to look at a subject, in Andre's case, the carnivorous plants of South Africa, and look at 3 things: the past, the present, and the future. The past. Why is the animal plant in question endangered? What's gone wrong? What are the threats? What are the reasons? What's happened and why? What's gone wrong? So the first bit is the past. And they have to make a really good film and a video report and an essay on that subject. Next, they have to look at the present. What is currently being done to safeguard that animal or plant? Again, in Andre's case, the carnivorous plants of South Africa. And is it working? Is the current work enough? And it's not about criticizing anyone. It's not about, shaming any projects that conservationists that aren't doing enough or whatever. That's not about it at all. It's about honestly and genuinely looking at the situation today and saying, is it working? Is the animal or plant in question conserved? Is it stable for the future? Or is more work needed? Or, do we need to do more? Is more resources needed? Or what do we need to do to conserve it and ensure that it's safe for the future? That's their second objective. Then most importantly of all, they've got to use their brains and think about the future. What more could be done? What more could we do to safeguard that animal or plant and give it a better future and a better chance of surviving for the future? So again, through the ICPS, as the International Carnivorous Plant Society, very generously sponsored Andre's project. Andre is looking right now at this subject, at these subjects for carnivorous plants in South America. The South American carnivorous plants are amazing. There's an incredible diversity, but I think it's true to say they've been relatively overlooked, certainly over the last few decades. They've been relatively little studied and relatively little cared for, certainly internationally. By people, by researchers and so forth. They've been relatively little studied up until this point. And this is a shame because many of them are incredibly localized. Some of them are known from 1 or 2 or 3 sites and nowhere else in the world. For example, Drosera regia, this plant on the right, arguably the biggest sundew of the world. It's known from, well, traditionally it was thought it was only known from 2 works, but Andre's own studies of it in the wild have proven, I think, at least 5 or 6 sites now, which is amazing. So, yeah, and for example, like these beautiful forms of the Cistiflora complex, each of these occurs, or many of these occur in just a handful of sites, particularly the red-flowered one and the yellow-flowered one, which, if I understand correctly, is just from 2 or 3 sites, and that's it. So they're super duper vulnerable. And many of these warm Mediterranean climate carnivorous plants, like Drosophilum in Europe and Africa, and like many others around the world, that live in these very fragile ecosystems that are balanced between fire, the need for fire to regenerate the vegetation has to be cyclically burnt, but at the same time, increasing drought, increasing fire suppression, and of course, increasing habitat loss and poaching and all these other factors. For all of these reasons, many of these ones in South Africa are particularly vulnerable to climate change and particularly prone to extinction. So this is a really, really, really big threat here in South America. This very important, incredibly diverse fynbos vegetation, which is something like the chaparral vegetation in California, and the Mediterranean climate ecosystems. They're often very fragile, very fire dependent, in complex ways. And if you disrupt that, you lose biodiversity quickly. And that's definitely the case here. And sadly, many of the carnivorous plants are in the firing line for that loss right now. Like Ruridula, very, very, very fire dependent. It must have its habitat burnt, otherwise it just gets pushed out. So it's cyclic. It needs to cycle through. And often, you often go there, you can't even see it. It's in seeds in the ground and waiting for the next fire to come through. So, oh, and of course, I should mention, not least, the taxonomic work of these amazing South African carnivorous plants. There are many, many, many new ones to be named. I'm not the one doing this. There are some incredible South African researchers working on this right now, and researchers from other countries. And I know a big study of them is going to be published in the not too distant future, totally changing our understanding of them. And that just goes to show how incomplete our taxonomic understanding was of them until recent times. So for all of these reasons, Andre's project is really, really, really important. So he's literally right now out in the field studying the South African carnivorous plant conservation. I deliberately don't get involved. This is his project. He's in charge of it. It's for him to design and execute. So we give him the opportunity, then we leave them alone, because that's the whole point of this project. It's not spoon-fed. It's about their own creativity. The Darwin leaders have to develop their own ideas, develop their own research, go and find out the problems themselves. So I can't wait to see it myself. Anyway, he's out there right now with his camera operator, focusing, I believe, particularly on Drosera regia, this critically important carnivorous plant of South Africa. And very, very soon, as in with the next few weeks, we're going to have his 3 awesome films and 3 awesome reports. And they'll be posted on the ICPS website and social media channels. So that's coming very, very soon. So stay tuned. So that's a little overview. Andre very kindly sent a few teaser photos of these beautiful South African sundews like Drosera regia. And as I say, we've left it to him to develop and execute. So I can't wait to see it as much as you guys. and hopefully it'll be a really interesting study of a really important subject in carnivorous plants and their conservation. So that's a little overview of my project. I'll stop sharing and come back by video now, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Stewart, for an excellent presentation. This was a joint webinar for TIES, the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science, as well as the ICPS, which is the International Carnivorous Plant Society. I am the education director for the ICPS, and I'm the education coordinator for the Center for Inquiry. And one of the programs for Center for Inquiry is TIES. Our website is tieseducation.org. We're very active on Facebook, and we have our own YouTube channel. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can see all of the past webinars from the past couple of years on there. TIES is all about supporting teachers who teach evolution. We want to equip you with the right resources. We have full, free, downloadable units in addition to lessons. So you can download an entire PowerPoint with activities and labs and hands-on experiences that will last 10 to 15 days. Or you could just go to our website and pick your own hands-on investigations or computer simulations or bell ringers. And all of it is for free. So check that out. The ICPS, as of April 2025, we have over 1,400 paid members, and the membership includes shared hobbyists all the way to professional nursery people, growers, as well as researchers and scientists who all love carnivorous plants. We're trying to balance the cultivation with the conservation. The first Wednesday of May every year is World Carnivorous Plant Day. If you go to the ICPS's YouTube page, you can see the last 4 years of World Carnivorous Plant videos. Every year we publish around 24 videos, one every hour, on the hour, from scientists and growers and people who are growing carnivorous plants on their windowsills, all the way to people who are doing high-tech tissue culture on our page to celebrate carnivorous plants. This year it is May 7th. All right. Thank you, Stewart, for my commercial.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you have a couple of questions. The first one is from Josh. What's going to happen after the ship docks in July?
Okay. Well, I think the first thing is going to happen. I'm going to have a cocktail after 2 years of incredible hard work. This has been a massive undertaking. It really has. We had to raise about £4 million, so about $5 million to execute this project. This has been a really big undertaking. About 10 years of work to make that happen. The truth is, so we built up this network of Darwin leaders. We're helping them get future roles. Many of them have already now got professional roles in professional conservation organizations. We want to continue this. We want to build this network and continue it. We're planning a second voyage, and we want to keep growing it year on year. And we're definitely going to have a year off to refresh and reboot and reprocess. But yeah, we want to do a different voyage following a different itinerary, particularly to Asia and Africa, which of course Darwin didn't go to. And keep growing this effort to help train amazing conservation leaders. Because you've got to remember, one person can have an enormous ripple effect. That's the whole point of this. These Darwin leaders, it's not just about them, it's about the ripple effect they have for the next 50 years. Just think of, for example, one incredible conservationist, Dr. Jane Goodall, and the enormous global impact she's had. So even if our Darwin leaders do 1% of the work that Jane has done in her lifetime, it would be worth it.
All right, Veer would like to ask, sir, could a 16-year-old be part of DARWIN200 leader?
Yeah. So we can't. You have to be 18 and above. But in a couple of years, that'll be about the right time for the next voyage. The reason for that is we fly you from wherever you're around the world to the ship. It's completely free. We cover everything, including the flights, but you have to legally be 18 and above, for insurance purposes and for flying on your own and so forth, and then your project. But in 2 years, you definitely could be.
All right, you have some fans from Sumatra,
Oh,
and Bertha says, I understand that while the Galapagos figures predominantly in his ideas, Darwin's time in Australia, particularly the Blue Mountains, also played a crucial role in shaping his thinking. Darwin's observation of unique Australian wildlife like the platypus and the geology of the region contributed significantly to his evolutionary ideas.
yeah,
Why
yeah.
doesn't Australia get the same attention or credit as the Galapagos?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a really, really, really good point. And he definitely did make some incredibly important observations. Again, it's not as if in the Galapagos he had a eureka moment and said, hey, evolution, wow, that makes sense. That is not how it happened. It was an accumulation of ideas during the voyage. And then many years back home, meticulously studying nature and natural selection. He did experiments on pigeons and rock doves. He did many, many, many different experiments and projects when he got back home. With regards to Australia, he made some incredibly key observations. He actually noticed how, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he observed the marsupials in Australia and noticed that some of the macropods, the kangaroo kangaroos and their relatives, were the direct evolutionary equivalent of deer and herbivores in the northern hemisphere. And he actually wrote a very important piece about how he wondered how one God made two separate worlds on separate sides of the planet, and why that should be. Why not have a rabbit in Australia? By the way, obviously there weren't native rabbits in Australia. They're not native to Australia. But my point is that he was like, why would God create marsupials in Australia and deer and rabbits and so forth in Europe? Why would this be separate? Why would the marsupials be down there and the placental mammals, the regular mammals up in the northern hemisphere? Why would you have two solutions for basically the same ecological niche? He hadn't answered the question of evolution in Australia, but he was getting pretty darn close to the track. And you can see literally in his writings how by that point he's figuring things out. He's realizing that the nature of the world isn't homogeneous. It's not the same all the way around. You've got different groups of species in different places. And ironically, this is exactly the same thinking of Alfred Russel Wallace, Darwin's contemporary, who worked out the Sarawak law, that species arise in places where a pre-existing species had already occurred, and obviously boundaries like the Wallace line. So it's very interesting to see both of these great naturalists totally independently thinking on the same lines. Getting back to Australia, so yeah, I mean, okay, his time in Australia, from memory, I think it was about a month in New South Wales, and two or 3 weeks in Tasmania, and then roughly a week or so, or something like that, a week in King George Sound. He made a lot of observations. I mean, okay, you're kind of right. It should be more well known. It should be more prominent than it is. Why it doesn't get the same attention as Galapagos? I mean, okay, this is probably a little bit unfair. Galapagos, obviously is famed for its endemism, its giant tortoises, and the Darwin finches and so forth that are very much connected to Darwin. You could make the argument that some of the most important milestones in Darwin's thinking that led to evolutionary science and origin of the species. I mean, yeah, he certainly had some in Australia, but he probably did have more, to be fair, happening in Galapagos. For example, the observation of the different tortoises on each island of the Galapagos, and how you could notice which island, you could identify which island a particular tortoise came from. And same with the Darwin finches and the mockingbirds with their beaks. That more directly led to the theory of evolution, because that was direct, clear evidence of species diversifying unequivocally between islands. Literally, you could see it. So, yeah, I mean, Aussie does, of course, deserve a lot more credit in the story than it perhaps should have got. Galapagos, to be fair, though, probably was the most important place for crystallizing these ideas. And again, it wasn't an instant process. He needed many years to think about this and to analyze it. But many of those very key observations definitely happened in Galapagos, as well as other places. But Galapagos really was the most important place in that process. Yeah,
You have several young people who want to participate in Darwin 200,
yeah.
and maybe you could like summarize maybe something that Jane Goodall has once said. Like for young people who are watching this, maybe the goal isn't to be part of your team, as in like a Darwin leader. Maybe the goal should be to be a local conservationist. How can you start doing
Well,
something?
yeah. Jane's message is that every single person matters, and this is an incredibly important message. That every single one of us can affect a positive change in the world of tomorrow, and that's arguably the most important message in conservation. It's easy to always say, oh, someone else will fix this problem, or someone else will pick up that piece of plastic, or someone else will, or report a poacher or something like that. All of us can contribute to that process. Oh, Bertha's just put in roots and shoots. Yeah, I mean, okay, exactly. This is, for those that don't know, this is the Jane Goodall Institute's wonderful organization that works with teams of young people around the world. So everyone can be part of this. It's not exclusive to conservationists or academics or whatever. That's not it at all. Everyone can be part of learning about nature, working to build a better future, whether that's planting a tree in your back garden or in your local conservation area, or volunteering with a plastic pickup project on a beach, or even just spreading the word and getting people to understand different problems in that way. Specifically with regards to Darwin 200, though, so yeah, there's lots of ways anyone in the world can be involved. Every single week, we have these world's most exciting classroom events. You can go to www.world's most exciting classroom, or there's a link on the darwin200.com website. Every single week, we have a new world's most exciting classroom. It's open, it's free, it costs nothing. Everyone can be a part of it. As I say, we have several $100s in prizes every week to get kids excited in science and nature and conservation. So that's the first way. The second way, well, okay, I mean, if you so happen to be in one of the countries that the ship is going to, like Cape Town, we have loads of activities. Like over the next 3 weeks, we have loads of activities in South Africa right now happening that people can take part in. They can visit the ship, they can be part in different projects. In many of the ports, we plant trees that open to anyone to be involved in, and so forth. So yeah, lots and lots of ways. But on a more general note, though, yeah, conservation is a process that involves all of us, and every single one of you, literally every single person worldwide, can be part of that, and crucially help build a better future.
I used to host a radio show about sustainable living, and one of our
Yeah,
guests, doctor in environmental studies, once said, like, the best thing to do is to not use plastic bottles. The best thing to do is to tell 10 people why not using plastic bottles is not good.
that's a
And
very
then
good
if those
point.
people, yeah, if those people share that information, then you get a movement going.
That's exactly right. That's absolutely right. But of course, it's very important to not just say you can't do this, you can't do that. I think it's very important to show why. Why do we not use plastic bottles? If you just dump one on the beach, well, look at that lizard that goes inside, gets trapped, and then gets literally fried and cooked in the sunlight. Once people understand the problems, then it's much easier to help drive solutions. And so I completely agree with you. That is critical, getting people to understand that. And that's why, by the way, the Darwin leaders, so this whole Darwin leader program with Darwin 200, yeah, sure, it's about training the Darwin leaders, but just as much so, the reason why they make these films and these essays explaining the past, the present, the future, is to give free resources, because it's all completely free, it's all completely online, it's all completely non-commercial, and that's about then exposing those anyone in the world can watch those and learn about the problems, and just as importantly the futures and what we can do about it.
For our last question, for people who really want to be a Darwin leader, can you come up with one or two traits that all your Darwin leaders share, even though some of them are studying plants, marine mammals, marine animals, land
Absolutely.
animals?
Totally. So, again, it's not about academic qualification. We don't care if you can read or write. That's irrelevant. What matters is the raw ability to get out there and do amazing things. It's a completely different quality from academia. The best way I can describe it is just pulling on your boots and getting out there and doing amazing things. As I say, one of the Darwin leaders I've got in mind is an 18-year-old at the age of 18, had volunteered and planted 30,000 trees in their spare time. Just went out there and started planting. I mean, that is incredible. Another one in Kenya set up a conservation project as a 16-year-old and found basically dead animals, dead cheetahs and so forth that had been killed, with roadkill on the side of the road. And she rescued the little cubs, the little kittens, the young ones, and set up a rehabilitation project to release them back into the wild, to help build them up again and release them. That's the quality. So it doesn't matter what you do. It's about making a change, because that's what this is all about. It's about empowering incredible people, drivers of change, people that will change the world of tomorrow. So that's the quality that the Darwin leaders have to have. And that's what we're looking for. People that by their own people that won't take no for an answer, people that won't accept that it's good enough for a certain animal or plant to become extinct. Like Andre, he went out on his own with no funding, no help. He did it all on his own back and discovered rediscovered populations of Drosophila regia that no one knew about. He totally changed our understanding of that species and has done loads to help conserve it and lobby in different ways for the conservation of carnivorous plants. So that's the skill, just getting out there and doing amazing things to build a better future of tomorrow. That's what makes these Darwin leaders such special people. And what I really, hand on my heart, hope is they'll then continue for the next 50 years of their lives, and change the world of tomorrow.
All right, let's end on that
Oh,
optimistic note.
absolutely.
Thank you, everyone who attended this live, and thank you so much, Stewart.
Absolute pleasure. It was lovely to speak to you today.